By 1917, the German military had been fighting for nearly 3 years in what had become a brutal war of attrition. The initial campaigns of movement had given way to an extensive system of fortifications stretching from the coastline of the North Sea to the Swiss frontier. Along this vast battlefront, industrial warfare reached levels of intensity never before witnessed. Artillery barrages reshaped the landscape itself. Infantry advances were measured in mere yards, gained or lost. Innovation focused not on restoring mobility to the battlefield, but on breaking through the deadlock that had consumed millions of lives. The flamethrower emerged as one of the weapons designed to overcome this tactical stalemate. Germany pioneered the systematic military use of flamethrowers in combat. By the war's middle years, these weapons had become specialized tools employed by assault troops tasked with destroying trenches, fortified positions, and defensive structures that resisted conventional infantry attacks. These devices were not issued broadly across the army. They were operated by specially trained pioneer soldiers assigned to carefully planned offensive operations. The flamethrower was never intended to dominate large areas of the battlefield. Its range was severely limited. Its fuel supply lasted only seconds. Its value lay in creating shock, both physical and psychological. Deployed at the right moment, it could drive defenders from positions that had withstood weeks or months of shelling and rifle fire. However, this same weapon made its operators among the most exposed soldiers on the front lines. German flamethrower teams in 1917 typically operated in small units. Depending on the equipment model, a team might consist of 2 to 4 men. One soldier operated the firing mechanism. Others carried fuel canisters, maintained pressure systems, or provided immediate protection. Their equipment was heavy, conspicuous, and fragile when exposed to enemy fire. Once engaged in combat, flamethrower teams became prime targets for enemy riflemen and machine gun crews. Survival depended on coordination, flawless timing, and the ability to reach enemy trenches before being detected. By 1917, German forces had refined their flamethrower tactics through brutal experience at Verdun, the Somme, and earlier battles in Flanders. Flamethrowers were often integrated into stormtrooper tactics, short, violent assaults designed to penetrate enemy defenses rather than hold ground permanently. These tactics emphasized speed, independence, and decentralized command structures. Yet even under the best conditions, flamethrower operators faced extraordinary risks. The fuel tanks they carried were vulnerable to small arms fire. While popular mythology often exaggerates the likelihood of tanks exploding when hit, penetrating rounds could rupture hoses, damage pressure systems, or ignite fuel under certain conditions. More commonly, operators were simply cut down by concentrated fire before they could use their weapons effectively. Casualty rates among flamethrower soldiers remained consistently higher than those of regular infantry units conducting similar operations. In 1917, the Western Front witnessed some of the war's bloodiest fighting. The Arras Offensive, the Third Battle of Ypres at Passchendaele, and continuous smaller attacks along the Aisne and Flanders sectors placed enormous strain on all military forces. Flamethrowers were employed in many of these actions, particularly during trench raids and limited attacks designed to improve tactical positions rather than achieve strategic breakthroughs. From this period come photographs and records showing dead German soldiers beside flamethrower equipment. One specific photograph, often circulated with the caption, "German Flamethrower Team Killed 1917, shows 2 German soldiers lying dead near what appears to be flamethrower equipment. The setting suggests a destroyed rural structure, possibly a farmhouse or outbuilding, typical of battlefield zones in France or Belgium. The equipment visible resembles earlier, heavier flamethrower models still in use alongside newer designs during this period. The photograph bears no written date, unit identification, or location marker. This absence of documentation is not unusual. Many wartime photographs were taken by soldiers or embedded photographers without detailed labeling. Other images became separated from their original captions during post-war archiving. Therefore, historians must rely on contextual analysis rather than definitive identification. What can be stated with confidence is that the photograph represents genuine battlefield casualties involving German soldiers and flamethrower equipment. It aligns with known patterns of flamethrower deployment and losses during the war's middle phase. Whether the photograph documents a specific, recorded incident from 1917 cannot be verified with absolute certainty. This distinction matters significantly. Historical scholarship requires verifiable evidence. While individual flamethrower teams were undoubtedly killed throughout 1916, 1917, and 1918, not every such incident was recorded in unit diaries or operational reports. Flamethrower units were small. Their casualties were often included in overall casualty figures rather than noted as separate events. German military forces did maintain records of flamethrower units, including the Guard Reserve pioneer regiments responsible for their deployment. These archives confirm substantial losses throughout the war's duration. They also confirm that 1917 saw continued flamethrower use despite increasing Allied countermeasures. By this stage of the war, Allied forces had adapted to the threat. Training manuals emphasized immediate engagement of flamethrower operators. Designated marksmen received orders to target fuel tanks and hoses. Artillery observers were trained to identify likely assembly areas for DEET. Assault troops. Once spotted, flamethrower operators rarely survived long. This adaptation reduced the tactical effectiveness of flamethrowers while increasing their cost in lives. German commanders, nevertheless, continued deploying them, especially in limited attacks where surprise could still be achieved. The calculation remained unchanged, a high-risk weapon for critical objectives. The deaths of flamethrower operators were not considered extraordinary by contemporary observers. They were accepted as part of the operational cost of offensive warfare. Post-war memoirs from German veterans occasionally mention flamethrower teams being wiped out before reaching enemy positions. These references are typically brief, matter-of-fact, and without dramatic embellishment. They reflect the grim acceptance of casualties by the war's middle years. The photograph associated with the caption, "German flamethrower team killed, 1917, fits entirely within this historical framework. It does not show an unusual event. It shows a predictable outcome of a dangerous task performed under extreme conditions. What makes the photograph striking in modern memory is not its rarity, but its clarity. It captures the vulnerability of soldiers assigned to carry one of the war's most feared weapons. It strips away romanticism and replaces it with the concrete reality of industrial warfare. Bodies on ground, equipment abandoned, purpose defeated by death. By 1917, such scenes no longer shocked those who encountered them. They were commonplace. Yet, they remain valuable to historians because they illustrate the limits of technological solutions to tactical problems. Flamethrowers did not break the trench stalemate. They did not deliver decisive victory. They provided localized advantage at enormous human cost. This lesson would echo into future conflicts. The photograph also highlights a broader truth about military innovation. Weapons designed to terrorize enemies often place exceptional burdens on those who wield them. The psychological strain carried by flamethrower operators was immense. Allied soldiers regarded them with fear and hatred. Capture often meant summary execution. Survival required both physical courage and acceptance of likely death. In this sense, flamethrower soldiers occupied a tragic space between weapon and warrior, valued for their effect, expendable in their use. The question posed, German flamethrower team killed 1917, cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. The historical record does not support identification of a single documented incident matching that description, but it does support the general reality the photograph represents. German flamethrower teams were killed repeatedly in 1917. They died in small numbers in forgotten sectors during attacks that shifted front lines by yards rather than miles. Their deaths were recorded statistically, not narratively. Their stories survive primarily through fragments, photographs, brief mentions, and the equipment left behind. This is often how industrialized war is remembered, not through individual names, but through aggregate casualty figures. In studying such photographs, historians must balance skepticism with humanity. Claims must be tested. Context must be reconstructed. But the human reality documented should not be dismissed simply because evidence is incomplete. The soldiers in the photograph were real. They wore German uniforms. They carried flamethrower equipment. They were killed in action on the Western Front. This much is certain. What remains unknowable, their names, their unit, the precise date, reflects not failure of scholarship, but the scale of the war itself. Millions served. Millions died. Most left without detailed records. The photograph endures because it compresses this vast experience into a single image. It reminds viewers that behind every weapon system, tactical doctrine, and operational plan stood individuals whose lives ended far from strategic objectives or historical narratives. Their deaths shaped the war not through dramatic victories, but through steady attrition and exhaustion. In 1917, the war continued because soldiers like these were sent forward again and again. And in that sense, the photograph does not ask for remembrance of a single event. It asks for understanding of a system.